The fishing vessel Northern Belle sank in the Gulf of Alaska in April 2010. Out of its crew of 4, 3 were rescued, but the captain, Robert Royal, suffered a fatal head trauma before rescuers arrived. Today, there is no information on if the wreckage was ever recovered. Such is the fate of many vessels out at sea. Regardless of the circumstances that brought the vessel to the bottom of the ocean, recovering the wreckage and preventing potential harm to its environment is often not a priority.
It's quite hard to look at any of it in isolation. As I was suggesting, a ship goes down, then different toxins getting into the ocean, that it's, as I said, a Pandora's box. And
there are over 8,500 potentially polluting vessels at the bottom of the ocean, holding anywhere between 2.3 and 20 million tons of oil. Getting an accurate estimate remains difficult.
Sea conditions had been rough, with waves up to 2 meters high.
With much of its dangerous cargo falling overboard, it is being called Sri Lanka's worst maritime disaster.
And it's the things that you can't see that probably do the most damage.
For the last couple of years, the number of large vessels lost at sea has steadily declined. But the estimates of the number of shipwrecks currently untouched on the ocean floor are still high. Many of them are left to degrade and leak contaminants into their environment. Most shipwrecks in the ocean are relics of World War II, a combined 7,807 vessels out of the total 8,569 in the ocean currently. The big problem we face in regards to sunken ships are the contaminants. A shipwreck free of the most harmful chemicals can actually go on to serve as a home to coral reefs, known as artificial reefs, providing a home to thousands of species of marine animals. The amount of polluting chemicals contained in vessels is often too high to provide a suitable habitat, like chemicals embedded into the paint of ship hulls to prevent barnacle growth.
Where Greenpeace had blocked this huge ship that was being repainted and resprayed, Captain wanted to meet with the campaigners. It was explained to him the chemicals his ship was being painted with were affecting the dog whelk. He was incredulous. He's saying, "You're blocking my ship for the sake of some tiny shellfish." And he just couldn't understand how significant that was, because that's the whole food chain. It's not just the dog whelk.
Aside from ship paint, many vessels went down with vast amounts of polluting cargo, including dangerous ammunitions and chemical agents used in the world wars, and mercury. But the most prevalent contaminant is one that is steadily leaking out of many wreckages in the ocean: bunker and crude oil.
Fears are growing over the fate of an oil tanker that has been stranded off the coast of Yemen for more than 5 years. Experts warn that the tanker may soon break apart, causing one of the largest oil spills in living memory, with devastating impacts on the environment and the economy.
Almost 8 years of civil war have left Yemen with a humanitarian crisis. But on the coast, a looming ecological disaster, a problem the UN calls a ticking time bomb.
The only way you can really retrieve oil from a ship is to pump it out before it sinks. Once it's sunk, it's impossible to retrieve the stuff. We really don't have the capacity to remove the stuff.
Light oil is the one most people are familiar with. Thin swaths of oil puddles floating on the surface. Heavy oil, however, sinks to the bottom and mixes with sediment, making it impossible to recover. Not to mention wreaks havoc on ecosystems that reside on the bottom of the ocean. There are technologies that clean up contamination from the ocean, but these technologies are not efficient, and many of them are just for show. In cleaning up beaches of contaminants, new chemicals are often introduced that can cause great harm to the environment. A much more cost-effective strategy is to clean out wrecks of their oil as soon as possible, before the elements erode away the protection meant to keep that oil contained. With the majority of shipwrecks being vessels sunk during the Second World War, there is debate amongst countries over who pays to clean up the wreckages, or if they should even be touched at all. Governments hide their responsibilities behind ethical concerns over the lives lost on these vessels, designating them as grave sites that cannot be manipulated. World War II wrecks are state-owned and have sovereign immunity, regardless of their geographical location. Thus,
They bypass maritime conventions that would dictate how and who monitors and cleans up the wrecks.
The three nations whose flag was posted on the most casualty ships of World War II were the US, UK, and Japan, who all have their own policies on how to deal with the wrecks.
The problem is that World War II shipwrecks laying by foreign coastlines cannot be dealt with by that coastline's government if the ship was carrying a flag of another nation, one who might not be inclined to provide funding for cleanup, even though the wreck poses an environmental threat.
They've prioritized these wrecks in US waters and they remove as much of the fuel and other contaminants as they can and then try and seal the hull. But that's only in US waters. International law says they're responsible for the vessel, but are they claiming their graves? And therefore they don't have to clean them up.
The legal basis is there for governments to clean up the wrecks of their World War II casualties and does not diminish with time or depth of the wreck.
Some wrecks are monitored, but there is historic precedent for these monitored wrecks to be found years later to have leaked out vast amounts of oil during the monitoring period.
The only convention to properly address sunken shipwrecks that's in effect today is the Nairobi Convention of 2007, which gives states the legal basis necessary to address shipwrecks within their waters, but unfortunately has only been ratified by Nigeria and does not address all the vessels, such as the ones from the war.
However, the biggest obstacle faced by those who make commitments to clean up these wrecks lies in the properties of oil itself. Even with the technologies of our modern world, only a small percentage of oil can even be cleaned up once it escapes from the confines of a shipwreck.
The immediate effects are almost certainly going to be on the species which live very close to the surface of the ocean, so seabirds and whales. As soon as they swim through it, the feathers of birds become clogged so they can't fly. The whales, they ingest it through the system, it gets into them and poisons them.
The harmful effects of these chemicals then magnifies as it works its way up the food chain, as bigger fish accumulate these chemicals from both their diet and the environment until finally it ends up in the diet of humans.
Polluting shipwrecks pose a threat to us environmentally, socially, economically, politically, and ethically.
Environmental experts have called it a massive wake-up call to governments to cut emissions.
Environmental pollution contributed to the deaths of about 9 million people in 2015. That's nearly 15 times as many deaths from war.
It provided the starkest warnings yet, not only about what could happen, but what's already been set into motion.
For the last decades, the public has seen an awakening of environmental concerns, from agencies and organizations to local politicians and even their peers. The problems we faced in terms of shipwrecks specifically needs to have the same awakening. The role of politics in this problem is undeniable, but mostly it is the lack of awareness that contributes to the ongoing situation.
As we open up a dialogue, we inherently raise awareness and shine a light on an otherwise under-the-radar issue that needs to be faced sooner than later.
Oil from shipwrecks is a problem that gets worse over time. Cleaning up oil while still contained within the confines of shipwrecks is our best bet for safe, efficient cleanup, preventing catastrophic effects on ecosystems later, and saving tremendous costs over time, both in terms of cost of cleanup operations but also preventing economic effects from environmental contamination.
An agreed upon solution needs to be presented and accepted worldwide, creating a legal framework around wreckage cleanup that's applicable around the world.
Included in that needs to be a globally available database to keep transparency between the public and governments regarding the state of shipwrecks, both to hold governments accountable for cleanup, but also for workers at sea to have an understanding of their working environment. Shipwrecks are ticking time bombs. They need to be dealt with before it's too late.